Kia ora, I'm Amelia Rangi and welcome to Oho Māori. Oho Māori is where I'll be having kōrero with some kick-ass people who are raised urban and their journey to discovering their tuakiri. From stories of disconnection and loss of identity to finding themselves and standing proud in who they are. Come along with me on this journey of awakening the mana and power of standing strong in who you are. Atamare e te hihita. Well, it's morning here in Aotearoa. I'm not quite sure what time it is over there in LA, but firstly, and we've had kōrero off air and stuff like that, but I just want to again acknowledge you and thank you for your karanga out to me and offering to sit with me today and have a kōrero and share your kōrero or share your story of where you're at and how you've gotten there. And so if I can get you firstly to introduce yourself would be awesome.
Sure. Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Amelia Butler aho. Hi everyone, I'm Amelia. I'm actually here in Memphis, Tennessee at the moment. So my partner's whānau, they live here in Memphis. So we're here over the American summer, but I am based in LA. So I am, Māori, Ngāti Wai, Ngāti Awa and Ngāpuhi. I know you mentioned earlier that you're from Ngāti Awa as well. So whanaunga. And I've been here in the US. I've started a business here about 5 years ago, and it's called Learn Māori Abroad. So I'm sharing, te reo Māori, te ao Māori, and also Kapa Haka with our whānau here in the USA, and also our global whānau around the world just through Zoom.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's really awesome, mahi, that you're doing. And I did jump in and check out what you were doing with there's a few other people in your mahi as well, and so it was really cool reading up about what you do and the fact that you are living abroad, you're living in LA and still holding on to, but also sharing te ao Māori with others. So can you talk about your upbringing and how you got to the US?
Well, I was, born and raised in Tāmaki Makaurau in Auckland. But, I was born in the 80s and, I think with the 1980s, that was really the start of the Māori language movement. And so I was really lucky to have been able to go to kōrero. I went to Te Unga Waka Marae when I was little. And my mum was really committed to me learning te reo Māori and learning about te ao Māori. And then as well as that, we'd always go up to my grandmother's house in the far north in Punaruku. And so we'd spend, the holidays and things, school holidays up there. So I started off at kōrero and then I went on to primary and secondary school, but those were in Pākehā schools. So my reo stopped for like a little while. But then in my secondary school, my mum actually fought for me to learn te reo Māori because the school I was at in Auckland, they didn't offer Māori as a subject. They had Japanese, French and German, but no Māori, even though this is in Auckland. And so my mum fought so I could learn te reo Māori, and I learned it by correspondence school with in Wellington. And we'd have to, it was back with the, cassette tapes. We had to record that and then send it to our kaiako in Wellington. And so that's where I restarted again. And then I went to Auckland Uni, Te Whare Wānanga o Tāmaki, and I studied te reo Māori as part of my Bachelor of Arts degree. And I also did, te ao Māori, Kapa Haka, majored in Māori studies. So that's kind of what I did in terms of learning te reo Māori. I was brought up by parents who didn't speak Māori, but despite that, they just were still very committed for me to learn te reo Māori. And so, my mum is a big reason why I'm doing everything I'm doing now. Yeah. And so what ended up happening is I actually moved to LA for hip hop dancing, to dance in the LA entertainment industry. And so I did that for a few years. And then after I had my tamariki, I wanted to kind of start up a business. I was thinking, oh, what could I study on? What am I good at? And I thought, oh, I could teach te reo Māori to like other Kiwis living in the States. And so I kind of reached out to a few, you know, on those Facebook groups for New Zealanders who live in the USA. I posted in a few, and I had a few people respond. So I started writing a te reo Māori curriculum, and then I started teaching. And my first group class was a group of 10 Kiwis living in New York. And they would like Zoom me in from LA. And that was back in 2018.
Wow, that's really cool. That and that's definitely who we are, and using our passion and our knowledge, and so that's such a beautiful thing to know that you wanted to share that with other people. And because there's got to be quite a few of us living over in the States, and many who probably don't have someone like you to talk with them, or to even share, or just to have a kōrero with. So the beauty of what you were doing over in LA and is amazing, and the fact that you were connecting to people in New York, because obviously America is many times bigger than New Zealand, and it's not like you can just drive down to wherever it is and go and have a cup of tea with someone. And so yeah, that's oh man, that's awesome. And when you first started, and because you said you created a curriculum around it, so what did that look like when you first started?
So, you know, when I first started, it had been a while for me, because I'd been living in America for, you know, the past few years. And so I hadn't really spoken or even connected with te ao Māori or te reo Māori myself. So I was looking online for like a course to do, and I ended up doing one in Otaki, and just like they have this online course and it's free for New Zealanders. And so I put myself in that just to kind of get a bit of a brush up on my own reo. And from there I just wrote a beginner's level curriculum. So just really like the basics, like the vowels, the consonants, pronunciation, greetings, basic sentence structures, and that's kind of how it began. And I got some interest with a group in New York, and yeah, it all kind of went from there. And so yeah, since then I've taught. So initially when I started, I thought it would only be like New Zealanders interested in learning, but I soon found out there's actually, you know, a lot of people interested, but they're not Kiwis or New Zealanders or Māori. So I have actually tauiwi who do my classes too, who just like love New Zealand culture, or they love Polynesian culture, or they've visited New Zealand. And so I get it's a really wide range of people who are interested in learning. And I think the big factor was that no one else was teaching te reo Māori to learners living abroad. And this was also in 2018. So no one was doing it on Zoom back then either. And so I think outside of, you know, Aotearoa in Australia, like I was the only one teaching te reo Māori, and making it accessible for people living outside of Aotearoa. So I think that was kind of a key factor, because people who live outside of Aotearoa, they just didn't have access to learning. And so I just, you know, as someone raising my tamariki in LA, I thought, oh, there's going to be others who really want to learn Māori and even raise their kids speaking te reo Māori, but they can't because they don't live it at home. Yeah. So it did end up, ended up creating a whole new kind of just reconnecting to all the people who couldn't do te reo Māori back in Aotearoa because it wasn't on Zoom back then. And yeah, because they didn't have anyone teaching it where they were.
Yeah. Have you found that, like, so where am I going? Have you found that you have, have you had any like indigenous, like Native Americans who have wanted to learn about, or learn more about Māori or the Māori culture and te reo?
Yes, I have. And it's always such a privilege when I have our like Indigenous brothers and sisters in class. So I have, and I think, you know, as Māori, we're actually really lucky. Like we're very lucky because I think because we're so remote in terms of the worlds, and we've only really been colonized within the last 200 years. And so we've been able to retain a lot more mātauranga, more knowledge, and we were able to retain our language gratefully. And now we're in this really big Māori language movement. Whereas some of our indigenous brothers and sisters, especially here on Turtle Island, Native American brothers and sisters, their languages have been completely wiped out, and they've like completely lost them, which is really super sad. But I think the great thing is, because, you know, all indigenous people at the core, at the roots, we're all the same. Like we all have those same beliefs, the same whakaaro. And so I'm really grateful that, you know, I can have indigenous people learn about our Māori culture as a vehicle, as a way for them to connect with their own indigeneity. And so this is why I do share our language and our culture freely. My classes are open to everyone because I want people to have access to connecting with their own indigeneity through the vehicle of the Māori language and te ao Māori.
Yeah, because I was just going to ask that. Have you had many of your tauira after sitting with you or after learning with you wanting or actually developing and going to find out more about their own indigenous cultures?
Yes, definitely. And it's always such a joy when, you know, because they've learned and been exposed to te ao Māori, it really makes them want to find out more about where they're from and where their ancestors are from, and, you know, where they whakapapa to. So yes, that's definitely happened. I've had people say, you know, when I'm sharing pepeha, they'll say like, oh, now, you know, I want to find out where I'm from. And so, you know, we kind of, we have different ways of expressing pepeha depending if you're Māori or not Māori. And so it's been really just a really rewarding experience for them because, you know, even Americans who have done my class, they've never thought like that before. They've never thought, what mountain do I connect to, or what river or what, you know, body of water am I connected with? And so in a way, I'm teaching this whole new way of thinking. And just really re-indigenizing their whakaaro. So then that eventually leads them to wanting to find out more about their indigenous roots, you know, where their ancestors are from. And so, you know, I think that's just amazing because I know for us as Māori, we get a lot of our power and our mana from knowing who we are, where we come from, knowing our whakapapa, knowing our iwi, and, you know, our whenua. And so it's just a gift that I can, you know, that I can share this with others, and that they can be empowered in who they are, and learn more about their culture and their indigeneity.
Yeah, and because that right there is what my biggest thing for, like we were talking about the Māori students at my school, and it's them finding out who they are is my biggest push. So for me, it's not, I don't want to teach them to speak te reo because, cool, you can learn a language. But if you don't know who you are first, then it's not going to mean anything to you. And so for me, pushing them to find out who they truly are as Māori, where they belong. And one of the biggest issues since I've been teaching that, it's not an issue, but one of the biggest mamai for me since I've been teaching is the fact that when I have a kōrero with one of my Māori tauira and I say, oh, so where are you from? I'm from up north. Anywhere in particular up north? Nah, my dad just said we're from up north. And that's as far as their mātauranga goes, is they just know they're from up north. They don't know their iwi, they don't know their hapu. For some kids, they don't even know their whānau that connects them to up north. And so that's always been one of the biggest mamai that I found in teaching, and especially with the way I was raised. And so I had to teach myself to not get hurt over something that I couldn't control, and to flip it and say, okay, so I'm going to help you find who you are, and I'm going to help you find your connections and your tūranga waiwai, and I'm going to teach you and show you how you can be proud of who you are, even though you don't or you don't necessarily get to go back to your whenua. And so it's one of those things that hearing you talk about it and teaching other Indigenous people or showing other Indigenous people why we as Māori are beautiful, and then them going away and wanting to make their own connections back to their whenua. I think that's one of the most beautiful things that make us who we are as Māori. And it's one thing that I think makes us different as an Indigenous people is our connection and our knowledge. And like you said, we are a lot younger in colonization than other Indigenous people, and so as much as we are still in that whawhai mode of getting everything back and standing proud in who we are a lot more not lucky, I wouldn't say lucky, but we are a lot more lucky in the fact that we still have a lot of what we our tupuna had and our teachings and things like that. So it's always a beautiful thing when we get to share with other Indigenous people and you just see that spark light up in them and seeing this massive, like, it's one of those light bulb moments, I guess, where you see their mana shining. So it's just hearing you talk about our Indigenous cousins and stuff like that, and that's such a beautiful way to get them to find who they are as well. And if we continue on that, how have you gone about ensuring that you uphold the mana of I guess the mana whenua in America?
That's a great question. So I think for me, because I'm teaching te reo Māori like in a different context, because the majority of my students are living abroad, but we have tauira who also join us from Aotearoa. But so what I've done is, like, whenever I teach like a workshop, like a haka workshop or a class, something that I always do is I acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of the lands that I'm on. So, in LA, I live on the lands of the Tongva, our Native American brothers and sisters, the Tongva, iwi, and also the Chumash and Tatabiam, other iwi of the Los Angeles area. Here in Memphis, I'm on the Chickasaw Nations, whenua, on our Chickasaw Nation brother and sisters lands. And so that's something that's really important to me as a, Māori woman, Indigenous women of Aotearoa, just to always be acknowledging whose lands I'm on. And so it's something that I'm always aware of. Something I teach my tamariki as well, so they know, whose lands we're currently on. And it's something that I also share with my tauira. So the unique thing about us at Learn Māori Abroad is that with our pepeha, we actually always include, as well as, for those who are Māori, obviously, their maunga, their awa, their waka, their iwi, their hapu, their marae. But we always also include whose lands we're currently on. So, ko Chickasaw te iwi o te wahi e noho nei au. So Chickasaw is the tribe or the nation of the place I'm currently living. And so that's, I think, a unique part of us being learners abroad, is that I always encourage my students to find out the tangata whenua of the lands they're living on, and then that's actually going to be included in their pepeha. And then, if they grew up in New Zealand, they'll also say, I tipu ake au I te whenua, or, Ngāti Whātua if they're in Auckland, or wherever they grew up to, if they did grow up in New Zealand. Yeah, so I guess that's something that's quite unique to us at Learn Māori Abroad, is that we do acknowledge the tangata whenua of the land we're on, because for me, I think, that's vitally important, and it's something I always do, when I do my mihi and te reo Māori, acknowledging, rangi nui and papa tuanuku. But what's always included in my mihi is also the lands, the people, the tangata whenua of the lands that I'm on.
A tahua rawa taua kōrero. Just so much yeah, so much aroha and so much beauty in what you just said there, and because and the fact that you know who the mana whenua, who the iwi is for the, like, you're not even at home at the moment and you still know who the mana whenua of that rohe is. I think that's an amazing that's an amazing thing to know. That and I guess if you were to go somewhere else, you'd also know the mana whenua of that's rohe as well. And so the fact that you ensure that you know whose whenua you are standing on, I just think that is the most beautiful thing, because it's something that we, not necessarily indigenous, but we as people sometimes forget to acknowledge every whenua that we stand on. And so for me, that right there is the beauty of who we are as Māori, and ensuring that we uphold the mana of whose land we are on. That, yeah, such a beautiful thing. And I'm not sure if you've heard much about well, apparently it's not a marae, but the marae that's getting built in Sydney and stuff like that. And yeah, and I think what you just shared there is part of your kōrero, I think, is, for me, is one thing that's missing for that marae that's going up in Sydney. Because just recently, I think it was last week, Māori Television did a little doco, and they had actually spoken to the people who are behind doing the marae, but also some of the local iwi, and just getting their thoughts on different whakaaro and just with some of the mob whose whenua it actually is. They just weren't happy that they weren't consulted from the start and stuff like that. So it's been a really interesting kōrero around that marae going up. And yeah, so not gonna dwell on that because many whakaaro could come out about that. And I guess what is one of the biggest struggles you find our Māori people abroad, like what is the biggest struggle they sort of, I guess, face?
You know, I think the biggest struggle for Māori abroad is the disconnection, because, you know, it's this idea, because as Māori, we're so, you know, we're connected to our whenua, to our tūranga waiwai. But, you know, due to colonization and even the urbanization that you were talking about earlier, many of our Māori whānau, they moved away from the rural areas into the cities. And then also, I mean, I know we all have cousins, you know, who have moved over there to Australia, and there's a other Māori living there in Australia, as we all know, and then also different areas of the world too. So, you know, I think we've always been Māori, we've always been kind of coming in our waka to Aotearoa, and, you know, so we've always been voyagers from, you know, back in the day to modern day now. But I think, you know, with Māori, you know, being born abroad and growing up abroad, yeah, there's this they're disconnected. And so, you know, often they come to my classes to reclaim their identity and to get back connected with who they are as a Māori person, and, you know, te ao Māori and, you know, te reo Māori. And so, you know, I think that's the biggest thing that Māori living abroad are dealing with. But, you know, gratefully there are those Māori who have been raised in Aotearoa and they are living abroad, and then but they're sharing the culture. Like in the UK, they have a really well-known Kapa Haka group, Ngāti Rānana. And so, you know, they welcome everyone and they're sharing our culture there in London. And then my sister is part of the Dubai Kapa Haka group. So, you know, there are Māori sharing our culture abroad. Yeah, so, but I think, you know, what comes with disconnection, and you know, it's a different level of disconnection when you're living outside of Aotearoa, because, you know, I know there are Māori back home who feel disconnected, but they still are on our whenua tūturu, right? That is our indigenous, it's our homeland.
Yeah.
It's Aotearoa. Whereas when you're away from the whenua, there's just a deeper level of disconnection. And so, you know, a lot of times I think, you know, that they might not even, they don't have that upbringing like we had in Aotearoa. And so, so which makes it even more important for them to have access to connect to our culture. And, you know, just the reality is, especially with COVID, like not everyone can fly back to Aotearoa. Not everyone has the financial means to even do that. Not everyone even has anywhere to fly back to, because sometimes it's, you know, their grandparents were even born here. And so then it's like, they don't even know their marae to even go back to. And so, in that sense, the disconnection is very real. But I think what's great now is just the access is so much more, you know, you can find out so much online about Māori culture and te reo Māori, and that, you know, we do have our classes where you can connect back. So, I think that would be koina te raruraru nui o ngai Māori e noho ana i tā wahi. And, you know, another thing too, I know you were talking about your tauira, and I just think, gosh, what a taonga, what a gift to be learning at such a young age where they are from, you know, how they're connected, and learning about te ao Māori. Like, and even, you know, it's just even a gift just knowing you're Māori. Like I've had students who they've done the DNA test and that's how they found out that they were Māori, or they were adopted. And they live abroad too. They were adopted. And so even just knowing that you're Māori is like, you know, a lot of people here in America, like a lot of Americans, they don't know who they are or where they come from. And they'll say, oh, I'm American. But we all know, like, unless they are Native American, like indigenous, you know, First Nations people, indigenous to Turtle Island, they are not, their ancestors came from somewhere else. And so, I think just even knowing you're Māori, and I just, you know, we really encourage all our rangatahi to just take advantage of being back in Aotearoa and to having that access to connect with our culture and our language, because a lot of people around the world don't have that. And they don't even have the whakaaro to even go and look for that.
And just I'm going to touch on a couple of things that you just said, but firstly, and I think that's why a lot of our, I guess, Kiwi raised New Zealanders struggle with the whole Māori video and stuff like that, is because, or from many conversations, but also from just observing and things, is it's because they don't connect back to where they're originally from. And they think, oh, but my ancestors been here for the last 5 generations or whatever. And so this is who I am. But one of the biggest things that I've, and I remember listening to this podcast, and they were just saying that, there's a Pākehā lady, and she was just saying that she was challenged when she went to a te reo class, and her kaia kōrero to go and do her pepeha and to go and research who she was. And so she did, and she went and connected it to wherever she was living. I think she was living over the shore. And so she made her connections back to the shore, and then she took it to her kaia kōrero, and kaia kōrero was like, no, where are you from? I want you to go and find out where you're from. She goes, but I've been here for 7 generations, and so this is who I am. They were like, no, I want you to go back and find out, okay, before those 7 generations, where were you from before then? And so she was just talking about how when she did that, that's when she truly found out who she was. And that's when she stepped into her true identity of self, and she saw the beauty, and like she was battling with her kaia kōrero, like refusing to do it and all of this sort of stuff. And she was just saying that, when she actually went and did it, she understood why her kaia kōrero made her do that and was challenging her to do it. And so she saw the beauty in actually connecting back to her people. and back to her whakapapa, and so she, yeah, it was such a beautiful kōrero to listen to, and hearing it from like a Pākehā perspective after being challenged and things, and she was just saying that now she understands why so many other Kiwi, I guess Pākehā, struggle with it is because they were like her, like how she used to be, and she just thought, no, I've been here for this generation, and I was born and raised here, and but yeah, it was that challenge that she then realized, okay, pepeha and connection is deeper than just being born in a place. Yeah, so I just thought I'd share that, but also I wanted to ask, how do you stay connected? Because you talked a lot about teaching your tawira about being connected, and that's the biggest issue with our Māori overseas and abroad. But how do you stay connected for yourself to, I guess, your whakapapa and your pepeha and who you are as Māori?
So I was really fortunate. I got to, very fortunate. I was able to go back home in 2020 over the COVID period. And then also we were back home last year as well, 2021. And we just got back here to Turtle Island in May. And so, you know, we were in rural Northland, we were in Whangaruru, and my kids were going to like a bilingual rural school out there, and so I got to spend a lot of time with my whānau, you know, my mum, my uncles, and so, you know, my uncle took us around, you know, the whenua and the moana, and, you know, did a lot of kōrero about the history of where we're from up there in the far north. And so, yeah, I'm definitely very grateful to be able to travel back home and, you know, to maintain that connection with where I'm from. I'm also the part of my whānau trust too. So I also host all the like the Zoom meetings every month. And so, yeah, still very involved with my whānau, and yeah, but back up there in the far north. And then something else I also do is I'm always, so my whakaaro is, even though I'm a, you know, te reo Māori teacher, I'm always a student. So I often connect. I have a lot of friends, Māori and also Pākehā, back in Aotearoa, and, you know, we'll speak over Zoom, you know, weekly. So I, you know, kōrero I te reo Māori. And so that's how I, you know, maintain my connections. And I've even done like a couple of just online classes and, you know, wānanga and things from this side, from stateside. But yeah, so, you know, we're so lucky in this day and age, I think, with the technology. Yeah. And I often think like, oh my gosh, what would our tupuna say if they knew that, you know, here's us, like, you know, we go to the store, we go to like Target, and I'm speaking Māori to my girls, and I know this is here in Memphis, and I know not one person understands what we're saying, but that's okay. I think, wow, what would our tupuna think? We're speaking Māori here in Memphis, or we're teaching Māori to people living in the UK, Europe, you know, Dubai, Japan, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, like, and I just think, oh gosh, I think they wouldn't believe it. They'll be like, what? Like, they wouldn't imagine that our language is now being shared all over the world. And so, you know, a lot of reasons, like when I first started, you know, learning te reo Māori as a young girl, it was, you know, my mum wanted me to learn, and then I did it in secondary school because I wanted to learn as a Māori wahine. And then I had the, you know, my tamariki, so I'm like, oh, I'm doing it for my kids. But now everything I do, 100% is all for our tupuna, because they weren't allowed to speak our language. They were beating for speaking it, for speaking it. And so, you know, that's why I think, you know, because we live in the time that these days, you know, we're not punished for speaking te reo Māori, we can speak it freely. And so I intend to take full advantage of that, and not only speak to my tamariki, but to share it with as many people as possible, because our ancestors could not do that. So, you know, I think this is our privilege of being alive now, in the age of the internet, where we can really share this taonga and, yeah, provide that generational healing from what our ancestors went through.
Yeah. Oh, that's so awesome and so amazing. And I guess that unlike, well, not unlike, I guess for you, that's such an awesome thing that you are still on like the board or the committee for your whānau, and but not even the fact that you're coming home quite often, but more the fact that you are still connecting back to your whānau that are still here in Aotearoa or wherever they are around the world, and you're still upholding our tikanga of those wānanga and wānanga spaces and hui and stuff like that. And so it's been, yeah, that's such a beautiful thing to have heard how you are staying connected, because it's one thing that I guess for many Māori or indigenous people who are living away from their whenua, it's then finding a way to get connected back to their whenua. And I know one of my friends, I've had a conversation with her, and she's from the Cook Islands, and one thing that she does is she goes and stands in the ocean, and when she needs to connect back to Rarotonga, so she'll go and stand in the ocean, because in her wairua, she feels like it's getting sent out to her whenua, and then they're sending back to her what she needs. And that's the way she's staying connected to the Cook Islands. And so I thought that it would be an awesome chance to get to ask how you are doing that.
I was just wanting to add another way I stay connected is we have our Kapa Haka group, Ngā Anahera Māori in LA. And so most of us are Māori. So, raised in Aotearoa. So that's another way I stay connected, in person, that is, with other Māori. And and I think, as Māori, our tupuna are always with us. And since they're in Te Awaia, they can be anywhere. Restricted. So I believe my tupuna with me, and here, and so another way to stay connected wherever you are in the world, your tupuna with you.
Do you ngaho with your kapa kōrero? Like, do you go and perform at different kaupapa or?
We do. So we we do a lot of events for the Kiwis in LA community. So we'll perform every year at their like art show, and we've also done some like corporate events as well. We were so Jason Mamoa, he did that haka for Aquaman. He did a haka on the red carpet, and so then they called us and they're like, "Oh, we want you to do the haka at the opening of the Aquaman exhibit." And so we got to do that at the Warner Brothers studios in Hollywood. And that was cool. And I just appreciate that they asked us, because, we're the only authentic Māori group in the sense that most of us are Māori. And, there's a lot of other Polynesian groups, but they're not Māori. So it's really cool. There's been just the opportunities over here have been quite amazing. Like I've even traveled doing and teaching haka for like corporate companies as part of their team building or team bonding and empowerment. And and so I think part of me sharing our culture abroad is I've really got to see how valuable our culture is. Like we are, like our culture, te ao Māori, te reo Māori, mātauranga Māori, it's really valuable on a global level. And so sometimes I wonder if people back in Aotearoa realize how valuable it is. And because you're surrounded by it every day. Yeah, I get it. You're like, oh, I can always learn te reo Māori later, or the wānanga will always be there. But I think being abroad, you do start to realize, wow, like even just here in the USA, like people are just so grateful to be learning like poi off someone who's Māori, like just like things like that. Like whereas back home everyone does the poi, but here they're just like, oh, they'll give me like gifts and stuff and be like thank you for teaching us. And I'm like, oh, they're so sweet. But again, I think just because there's like not a lot of Māori sharing our language and our culture on like a global level, and as far as I know, I'm the only one sharing our language, our culture and Kapa Haka here and on Turtle Island. And I know I've been saying Turtle Island. So Turtle Island is the Native American name for the lands I'm on. So Turtle Island includes Canada, America, and Mexico.
Oh,
And so I like to call this land Turtle Island, because that's the way that I can honor and acknowledge the indigenous people of the lands I'm on.
yeah, that's awesome to know. What, because over the last few years, there's been a lot of, like, especially in America, a lot of different sports teams and different, I guess, at different events, you see a haka pop up, and when done right, they're amazing. But you know, you do see the odd one that's a bit questionable and things like that. And but what are your whakaaro around just Americans embracing te ao Māori, I guess, is probably my pātai.
You know, so for me, and you know, part of the reason why I do share te ao Māori and te reo Māori with everyone is because Americans just don't have access to connect with it gives them an access to connect with an indigenous culture and to see the world differently, that they just wouldn't have otherwise. And so I think a lot of Americans are really attracted to our culture because, for example, like the haka, right? There's haka videos that have gone viral on social media because people watch it and they just think, wow, this is amazing. And they really feel it on a deep level, a deep spiritual level. So here in America, there's nothing like that. You know, I'd say maybe the closest would be maybe like martial arts from like the Asian countries. But here in America, they don't have that kind of way of expressing themselves. And so when they see people expressing themselves through haka, they're just amazed. Like, it's like, they just think it's just so amazing because it's something they've never seen or experienced before. And so then naturally they want to do the haka, they want to experience it, they want to try it. And you know, I do believe that only Māori should be teaching haka. Like, I think that's really important, because then you're learning it from someone who's actually Māori. You know, they know the culture, they grown up in the culture, and they're aware of the significance of the haka. But I also think, you know, like, because I do teach haka, but I also, you know, when I teach it, I also share with them like, hey, you know, this dance, it is sacred to our people and the significance of it. And so, you know, I ask them not to teach it, not to go and, you know, perform it, just to maintain the integrity of my work and the integrity of the haka. But I also think because of the kind of empowering dance it is, like, it really gives people something that they haven't experienced before, and that can really be life-changing for a person. And even exposing them to indigenous whakaaro, I really believe that indigenous whakaaro, indigenous thinking, is the key for us to change the world. And I believe if we can share, you know, our indigenous whakaaro, you know, and for us, obviously, te ao Māori, Māori cultural worldview, that could ultimately change a lot of issues we're facing currently in the world. You know, like climate change, environmental crises, poverty, and because a lot of these issues are systemic because of, you know, colonization, capitalism, patriarchy, supremacy, because people have lost touch with that connectedness that we have in our Māori culture, that whakawhanaungatanga, the idea that, you know, we are all one, we're all connected, we're all whānau. And so I do think by sharing indigenous knowledge and indigenous whakaaro, that we can make the world a better place. And so that's ultimately why I do it, because I believe, you know, as indigenous people, we've been doing these things for thousands of years. You know, and it's really the Western culture that's come along and, you know, created a lot of the really toxic situations that we all live in, that do not work. Like they don't work. The ideas of capitalism or, taking resources from the environment. Whereas if we were living in line with indigenous whakaaro, there'd be plenty for everyone, because we wouldn't be, taking so much from Papatūānuku. And so, so that's my grand vision, my big vision, that by sharing indigenous culture and indigenous whakaaro with others, that we can make a difference in the world.
Yeah. And it's been an interesting thing back here with our with mātauranga Māori, and like especially in the science world, and scientists saying that mātauranga Māori isn't science. So there's been a lot of kōrero around people challenging mātauranga Māori and if it even holds a space. And like you just said, our mātauranga and our indigenous ways of doing things and thinking is actually what, I guess, what allowed us to live in such a way where we've flourished in every aspect of our lives. And whether that was through our kai, or whether that was through building, or whether that was through just sharing with each other, the way we as an indigenous people lived and thought and still do, is why we flourish so amazingly well in environments that aren't doing so well. But yeah, it's indigenous knowledge is definitely a beautiful thing, and indigenous knowledge, I think, needs to be, well, I'm speaking more specifically here in Aotearoa, indigenous knowledge needs to be appreciated more than what it is, because it's like you said, if we allow our indigenous knowledge to be implemented, things like climate change would be so different, because it's our indigenous knowledge that has the ability to teach how to look after Papatūānuku better, how to look after the taio better, and how to look after what pollutions are getting released and things like that. And so if we allow our indigenous mātauranga to be put into the forefront, I believe we'll have so many different, we wouldn't be living in the same way that we are today, especially around climate change and just the effects that we as humans are having on the whenua and on our earth and things like that. So yeah, that indigenous knowledge is I think needs to be put at the forefront of everything we do, because it's such a beautiful, it's just the way and we think, and acknowledging that there are issues and there are natural ways of, I guess, fixing what damage we have done that shouldn't have happened. And I guess what I'd love from you are some words of encouragement for people like, for other, not just Māori, but I guess for indigenous people around the world who are so far away from their tūranga wāre, who are so far away from their whenua and their connections back to their tuakiri. What would be some words of encouragement from you for them to, I guess, keep pushing and keep, or even getting connected to someone who, like yourself, who shares your mātauranga and deal with other people?
Well, for me, something I like to share with my friends here is our whakatauki, he kākanoa hau I rea mai rangi ātia. And, the way I think of that is that we're all seeds, and, some of us were, we all at one stage were seeds on a big tree. And, some of us, for us, the seeds, they drop right there where that big tree was. Mm-hmm. And so, we've been privileged to be raised in Aotearoa, if we are Māori, and to be connected and have those opportunities to connect with our culture. But many, many of us were blown by the winds of tāwhirimatia to different whenua, to different lands. And so for example, my partner, he's Black American, and so his ancestors are from Africa, and they were enslaved and they were brought on slave ships to here to the Americas by force. And so, you know, what I like to share with people is that, you know, even if you don't know where you come from, that is okay, because we're all seeds. Some have been blown near, some have been blown very far, but where you come from, it actually exists in potential form. And so, you know, maybe you don't know, and I have to say, we are very grateful because we've been able to find out. So my partner is Native American and also Black American. And we've been able to find out his Native American tribes, which he's with his whakapapa is the Choctaw tribe, and also Blackfoot on his Native American side, and on the African side it's the Fulani tribe from West Africa. And so, because for me, when I had my tamariki as a Māori, I was like, oh, I need to find this out. I need to find out what your iwi are, you know, and he didn't actually know, but gratefully there was a cousin who was really into the whānau history, and so I found out through the cousin of my mother-in-law. And so I just really like to encourage people that to connect with where they're from, who they are. If you don't know, maybe you can only know the continent, for example, Africa. That is okay. I encourage you in that case, because where you're from, it exists in potential. And I just encourage you to connect in different ways. For example, for us as Māori, we believe that knowledge can come to us when we're dreaming, and that our tupuna visit us in our dreams. And so I just think we just got to find other ways to get information. You know, it could be the internet, the World Wide Web, but it also could be through dreams. It could be connecting to Te Ao Wairua, which is the spiritual world. And I believe those kind of ways of getting information are just as legitimate as, you know, doing a Google search. And so that's what I would encourage our Indigenous brothers and sisters to do, you know, and I do believe if you hold that intention to find out where you're from, that it will come to you, but just be very open to finding it out in a more non-traditional way, which, well, for us as Māori, these are our traditional ways, but from the Western, from the Pākehā culture, you know, there's different whakaaro there. But for us as Māori, it was very normal for us to get information from our dreams and from our ancestors speaking to us when we were dreaming, or even when we're not dreaming, when we're awake. So yeah, so that's my advice, so people can connect, and then also find someone in your area or who's doing what you're doing. You know, for example, if you only know, oh, I know I'm from Africa, that's okay. You could, you know, join an African dance class, and yeah, maybe it's not going to be specific to your iwi, to your specific tribe, but at least you're learning your culture through the dance, you know, connecting with the food of your continent or your culture, and connecting with other people who are sharing the mātauranga from your culture, your mahi. So yeah, so that's what I would say. And definitely just hold that intention, because I fully believe that you can find out, as long as you're open to different ways of finding out.
Wow, that's amazing. That's an amazing kōrero. And I'm not going to add on to that or anything, because I just think that's beautiful in itself. But just one last part though for you. And it's one that I think it always makes people think when I ask this, but what do you want people to think when they hear your name?
I think that's such a good question. You know, if there was one thing I would want people to think when they heard my name, it would just be like, oh, Amelia, oh, she made a difference in my life. And that would be the biggest honor that I think I could ever have, that I was able to, you know, touch someone's life, that I was able to make a difference in their life, you know, through the work I do. or you know, through sharing the Māori culture, that they just, you know, would be able just to connect on that deeper level to who they are or who they were. But yeah, ultimately that would be the greatest honor, just to make that they would think of my name and think that I, you know, like I made a difference in some way in their life.
Real interesting. Just before I wrap this up, real interesting, because my teaching philosophy is based around the whakatauki whaia te kahurangi ki te tū o koe me he maunga teitau. So my biggest goal, or my teaching philosophy, is if I can be that one positive voice in any child's life, if I can be that one person who reminds them how amazing they are and how much they can achieve in life, then that's when I know that I've done my job. And so just hearing you talking about that reminded me of what it's always been my goal, or what's always been my vision, or what's always been my dream, is to just be that one voice for that one kid that everyone has written off, or that has been told their whole lives that they're nothing. And it's been such a beautiful thing over the last few years when I've had the chance, or when my ex-students have come back to see me, and it's those kids that you don't think you've done anything for. Like, it's those hotusu kids that you just yell at all the time, or you're correcting all the time, and it's like those are the kids who come back after however many years, and they've just come back and seen me, and they're like talking to me about what they've done and what they're doing and what they've achieved. And it's like and I remember, I think it was a couple of years ago, where I've had an ex-student come back and like just brought me this koha and just saying thank you for what I thought was nothing, but obviously it made an impact in their life and so it's those moments that I think are the most beautiful moments that we could ever have. And so yeah, just jumping on what you want people to remember you for, or to talk about or think when they hear your name, I was just like, that's exactly what I want to do for my students, for my tauira, is to, like, yeah, just for them to remember that I will always be that positive voice for them, or I'm always here no matter how old they get. And I hope they hold on to something that I've shared with them. And but yeah, I just thought I'd share that little kōrero with you. Engari, e te māreikura, e te wahine toa, nei rā ku mihi, o ku mihi aroha, o ku mihi nui, o ku mihi maioha, nei rā ku kupu ki a koe tēnei wā, mō mahi hei, e hara i te whakanui e te ao Māori, engari hei tūkaha i roto i tō tuakiri. Mō mahi kia whakapakiri, mō mahi kia kaha ake, te ao Māori ki te ao. Nōku te honore kia noho tahi i tō tahi tēnei asa. Kia rongo i tō kōrero, kia rongo i tō ngākau, mō tō mātou tuakiri. It's just been an amazing privilege to be sitting with you today and to hear your heart for our culture, but more so to hear your heart for wanting to help others. And for me, that's one thing that I was taught by my karawa and kuia, was we are a people who want to see others flourish. So nothing we do is about ourselves. We are a generational thinking people. We are not just thinking about ourselves, but we think about the next 10, 20 generations that we are coming, that come after us. And I heard a kōrero this morning from one of the podcasts I listened to, and he was just saying that we are the tipuna for the next generation. And what legacy are we going to leave for our future generations, and what sort of tupuna are we going to be for the next generations? And so for you, e te rangatira, you are doing such amazing things that I love the fact that you walk around an American supermarket or shop and you are using te reo Māori for with your tamariki, and you might get those weird looks of like, what are they talking, or what are they saying, and all of that sort of stuff. But the fact that you are raising your own tamariki away from their whenua, but ensuring that they hold on to the mana of their people. Not just our Māori culture, but also their other two indigenous cultures of their African heritage, but also their Native American heritage. And I think people like you are such a blessing to our world, because again, you're not thinking about just you're thinking about what is to come after you, and the legacy you leave is going to be such a beautiful one for not just your whānau, but the many whānau that you are helping and that you have helped. There is going to be such a massive awakening within those legacies that are to come through your mahi. And I just want to thank you today just for the beauty that you are sharing with the world, and the fact that you are sharing te ao Māori with the world, or you're using what you know to better the rest of the world and to better our people. But just, yeah, thank you so much for your karanga out to me, and for offering to sit with me today and to have this kōrero and to share your mātauranga and to share your mahi with not just myself, but with the people who listen. And I'm just very privileged to have had you share your story with me, and I'm so looking forward to, and definitely looking forward to, what is yet to come from you, and the many more lives that you're about to change, and the impact you're about to have on those who don't yet know that they need you. And so, yeah, mai ahau ki a koe e te maraikura, nei rā ku mihi nui, nei rā ku mihi aroha. I tēnei wā, I runga i tēnei kōrero, I runga i tēnei kaupapa, hei whakanui i tā mātou tuakiri. So no, thank you very, very much.
Mihi nui nui i te maraikura. Thanks so much.